Good afternoon, Britain. Some breaking news just coming into us. Gibraltar will remain British, but people will be able to travel freely across the land border with Spain, according to a new post-Brexit agreement on the territory. It's not just, however, that people will be able to travel freely across to Spain. It's that Spanish guards will now sit at Gibraltar Airport. If you want to visit Gibraltar from Britain, it will be EU border controls you have to travel through.
So it's kind of Spanish. In any case, the UK, alongside the government of Gibraltar, has published a draft treaty with the EU that outlines the arrangements for a fluid border for people and goods. The deal would mean no routine passport checks at the Spanish-Gibraltar border for the 15,000 people who cross it every day, around half of Gibraltar's workforce.
Now, that means no border checks between Gibraltar and Spain, but of course Gibraltar is British, and there will be Spanish checks between Britain and Gibraltar. Previously, these were, of course, administered by the British and the Gibraltarian border guards. But instead, if you want to import something to Gibraltar now, it will go through EU customs controls. If you want to travel to Gibraltar yourself, you could be stopped, arrested, searched, interviewed by Spanish border guards.
So it's when we always say on this programme, John, the devil is in the detail. The detail in this one is very interesting and doesn't actually back up the claim that we are hearing from the government.
Well, they've moved the border, haven't they? No longer will the border be between Gibraltar and Spain. Instead, the border will be between Gibraltar and Britain.
So how does this affect if you are flying into Gibraltar?
Well, you'll have to go through two different customs checks. Firstly, you'll have the normal Gibraltarian border controls, but then there's a second line that will be installed of Spanish border controls that you go through, which doesn't sound particularly British.
Well, yeah, we'll have more on this breaking story later, but you can be sure we'll be exposing all the proper details about what's going on here, but we haven't paid Spain anything to give it over to them yet, have we?
Well, no, it's not quite a Mauritius situation, no. Much more on that, of course, throughout the programme.
OK. We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code and account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
OK. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just live in credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponise against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
OK, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
Gibraltar will be seeing Spanish border controls being implemented for people travelling from Britain to what is British territory. Now, the government's trying to spin this, saying Gibraltar will remain British and, of course, there'll be free travel between Spain and Gibraltar. But ultimately, this is now Spanish border guards on Gibraltarian territory. Let's speak to Jack Carson, our national reporter, about this. Jack, the government seems very proud of this deal.
They do. Of course, we were in Gibraltar in summer last year speaking to people there and how important a deal would be, but it was always going to come down to the terms of the deal as to exactly whether people ultimately would feel this would be a good thing for Gibraltar going forward. For people that live in Gibraltar and work in Gibraltar, we know there are 15,000 people that have to travel across that land border between Gibraltar and Spain every day. For them, this free movement essentially is positive for Gibraltar's economy as a UK overseas territory. But the sticking point was always going to be how exactly it would work with UK nationals going to an overseas British territory and whether Spanish border officials would essentially be checking British passports to enter a British territory. That seems like essentially that is part of the case of how this deal works. So from what I'm understanding is that Britons would go through two stages essentially once they get to Gibraltar. There'd be a separate entrance to the way they currently go through to a second line check area where Gibraltar and then Schengen controls would be carried out. So the Schengen interaction in the deal essentially said it would be automated border control system, a little bit like with the fingerprints essentially that we have, you know, if you were to say get on the Eurostar at St Pancras. But those who maybe are not eligible to go through that or have problems going through that would then go to Schengen immigration booths where uniformed Spanish officials would then check passports and also have the right in an entry refusal mechanism to refuse entry to third country nationals if they don't kind of have the right details with trying to get into a Schengen area. So these are the concerns that have certainly been raised today in the Commons by Wendy Morton, Shadow Foreign Minister, saying that there's serious concern, she says, about the operation of the border and the dual checks, particularly also around the adoption of future EU acts listed in the annexes. So this essentially could lead in the future to EU law being implemented in Gibraltar without, of course, them having any kind of political control over this. And naturally, people are drawing connections between this Gibraltar deal and the Chagos deal as well, which we know is starting to be suspended at the moment for some time being. But Mr. Doherty, the foreign minister in the Commons today, saying that was completely erroneous to draw a comparison between the two and hugely unhelpful. Certainly the government and the chief minister in Gibraltar, Fabian Picardo, are saying that this is Gibraltar remaining British. This is them retaining their self-determination, but with British border officials at the border. Some people here certainly will feel that doesn't feel like the case.
Indeed.
Yeah, Jack Carson, thanks very much indeed for that detail.